Hi, and welcome to Voices of CFMA, Construction Financial Management Association's podcast featuring conversations with industry leaders, sponsored by Old Republic Surety. I'm your host, Sal Marino, CFMA's Director of Communications. This month, I am happy to be joined by Brad Anderson of IMA Financial Group. Brad, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yep, my pleasure, Sal.
So, why don't you tell everybody listening what you do?
I represent a top 20 insurance broker in the market, specializing in construction and real estate. IMA was a regional broker for 30 years before we felt like being on the offensive was our next stage. Uh, our industry was going through an M&A process, and the giants were getting bigger, and we decided that we were going to go on the offensive, and it's been great. We've become a top 20 broker. We're a full service broker that includes all lines of property casualty insurance. We own a wholesale brokerage. We have an entire line for benefits. We have a surety department. We have a wealth management division. And we have recently gotten into the tech space and have formed a partnership with some other groups around the country to further develop technology in the space as well. So I love risk. I love that companies need to assess it and have strategy around it. And construction has been something that I've dabbled in for about 15 years in other areas, and happy to have found CFMA through that process. And but my days are spent helping construction companies and real estate firms, see around corners and maybe present some solutions to them that to problems they don't even know they have.
Awesome. And is this something you always wanted to do?
Absolutely not. I had no idea. I still have no idea what I really want to do, Sal. Um, I becoming a team member with the IMA group, who's now over 2,000 employees, has just been a blessing. It's been a stepping stone of sorts. Like, I just started out waiting tables and upselling drinks and desserts, and then I got into the vehicle and equipment leasing world, and then I got into I worked for a Volvo dealership at one point and developed an F&I department, and then I transitioned into working with an entrepreneur who was starting a business in the industrial bolting world, and that's really when
Wow.
I got a taste for safety, because we were selling to refineries and chemical plants and natural gas compressor stations and people with just big nuts and bolts, and our service and products were tailored to that industry. We didn't want things to explode, right?
Right. Sure.
Interesting story quickly. I was in that process down at a trade show in Baton Rouge, and a guy who has these boxes, these containers, storage containers that you see come through on the ships. He was renting those out of Wichita, Kansas, and that's kind of my home base where I started my career. I live in Dallas now, but I was in New Orleans. Here's this Wichita-based company. They're peddling something to do with these crates, these containers. And I approached the guy, and it was Jeff Lang. He was the owner of the company. I'm like, Jeff, what are you doing here? I'm from Wichita. And he's like, oh, yeah, I'm from Wichita too. And I go, I know. And that's why we're talking. And he said, he goes, my company was just renting these containers, and then suddenly I'm sitting with an engineer at the Texas Bay City refinery. You remember, Brad, it exploded years ago. And I was like, I do remember that. He goes, well, he showed me an aerial view of the refinery before and after, and the only thing that stayed in the place that it was before the explosion was this shipping container. And he said, I think we got something here, Jeff. And he ended up forming this company that is now a client of mine at IMA that they provide blast-proof containers all over the world to governments, to just anybody who doesn't want their people and stuff to explode.
Right.
They want to protect their people. Anyway, it's kind of a funny way of answering your question, just to say, I had no plan, man. I just wanted to get a college degree, which I did. And then whatever happened after that, just that you fell into place. I just wanted to treat people well. That golden rule thing, right? Don't burn
Yeah.
any bridges, treat people with respect. And people came to me and they said, "Would you?" And I, said yes. And here I am, 8 years later. And I hope this is it. I hope I retire at IMA.
Awesome. Yeah. Golden rule and also don't explode. Those two things
Yeah,
put together, right?
don't explode. Yes. Yes. I wake up every morning and I pray. I'm on my hands and knees. Please don't explode today.
And who knows? Because it's post COVID world, anything could happen, really.
Right, right, right. That's so true.
So how did you get started with CFMA?
Yeah, so I was in my early weeks of the insurance risk management world, and an acquaintance of mine that I had known through a Y Men's Club in Wichita, Kansas, was running the surety department for IMA, and he said, "Hey, you want to go to lunch?" And I said, "Yes, Brett, I would like to go to lunch." And so he took me to my first CFMA meeting in the Wichita chapter, which is a fantastic chapter. And I was introduced to a great group of people. I had spent a little bit of time in that anti-blowing up world, with a group called the Southern Gas Association that I really liked too. And this just felt a lot like them. They were just down to earth people that were running construction companies, and they were controllers and they were CFOs. And I like those people, and they seem to be the circle that I needed to run within to kind of grow my business. And I've been a member now, in the Tulsa chapter, the Oklahoma City chapter, the Austin, Texas chapter, and now I'm on the board at the DFW chapter, which I believe is the third largest chapter in CFMA, and soon to be number one for anybody listening out there in Denver or Phoenix.
Shots fired. He's coming
Shots
for you.
fired. Here we go.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, Brett. I owe it all to Brett Burton. Great guy. He's now retired and sailed off to the sunset, and I believe is doing expeditions out in like Africa or something like that, and sitting around eating bonbons.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh, so September is Suicide Prevention Month, as you know, and you are a member of the Suicide Prevention Committee. And we talk a lot about mental well-being, mental health. In your opinion, is there more that can be done internally at organizations to handle mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we talk about it enough. And I think it took a global pandemic for us to even have conversations, because quite frankly, people came out of that period of time struggling,
Yeah.
Sitting around staring at your own walls uh, for day after day. We put people away for doing bad stuff, right? And we go stick them in a room and have them
Right.
stare at the same walls. I mean, interestingly enough, it just happened to the planet, and coming out of that, it really shined a light on the craziness that goes on between people's ears. And quite frankly, nobody's immune to it. I mean, you just look around the world right now and we can identify crazy everywhere. And it's a term that I use somewhat loosely, but crazy can mean a lot of different things. And it's not really fair term, but it's a term that we throw around a lot. Like, God, man, that person just acts so crazy. Like, we'll see him at a baseball game, 12-year-olds going at it, and two moms are over there in the corner just like thrashing each other because there was the call at third base wasn't great, right? And we call it crazy. And the fact of the matter is that we're all struggling with things between our ears that are challenging. And we have these remedies that we have developed that are supposed to help us manage. A lot of people now take benzos, or they take gummies, laced with THC, or they just get a box of wine, and that eases the pain of the craziness looping through our brains. And it's all fine and dandy, if it works, right? I think that people going to get help, instead of doing those things, like actually going to get to the root of the cause, it is over the decades that I've been around, it's just something you did behind closed doors. Like, I don't want anybody to know I'm going to talk to the therapist. Um, but I think today, we realize that we've just got a few things we need to look at. And in construction, we've got a male-dominated industry. We have a lot of machoism. We've got a lot of big, strong guys that are out there doing manual labor, and they're building the things. And the last thing that those guys really want to be shown doing is walking into a therapist and crying into a Kleenex and saying, I need some help, right? Um, but the reality is that I don't care what sex you are and how large you are, the human being is not immune to just struggling and trying to figure out how to make sense of the craziness of the planet, right? So as employers, I think as we've come out of the pandemic, it's never been more important for us to realize that today, right now, we already have employees in-house that are struggling with something. And it could be root cause death in the family. It lost a child, 5, 10 years ago. It could be alcoholism. It could be drug addiction. It could be that, quite frankly, you were in an automobile accident and you never recovered. You're just not the same. Everybody's got a story, and there are 1,000 of them out there. And the fact of the matter is that people need other people to help them build an energy that gets them through the day sometimes. And in my opinion, and this is an opinion, I would like to see us move more towards working towards that and developing skills that you can do with other people, or quite frankly by yourself, that allow you to get through that stuff versus reaching for the box of wine, the benzos, or the laced THC gummies, right? So the I think companies can do more. um, I might beat you to the next question. Here's an example of something that our company IMA is doing that I have found to be very valuable. In fact, we started about 6 years ago. A gentleman that was in my position as a producer for IMA felt a calling. He had a great career, and he said, "Listen, I've this has been wonderful, but there's something else." And what I'd really like to do is to talk to people. So before the pandemic, Brad, his name is Brad as well, he approached the executive team and said, "Hey, what do you guys think about a coach? What do you guys think about just somebody that the IMA family can talk to?" And they all agreed it was a wonderful idea. He retired from that, transitioned into what we call basically a life coach. And prior to the pandemic, we had a guy that we could engage with, whether you were answering the phone for IMA, whether you were an A-type high, intensity person selling out in the world, or you had a book of business and it was a grind every month to get the renewals through. You had somewhere where you can turn. Well, it's been so successful that now with 2,000 employees, we have two of those people,
Wow.
and it's free of charge, and we don't pay for it. We can book whenever we want to, as often as we need to. So if you're going through something at home, you have the ability. IMA has provided people that we can talk to that are licensed, that have had experiences in their lives, that can share some empathy.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just one example of a way that companies can support the people that are already, in the walls on the team. Um, But I also think that there's something else the construction industry can do with the folks that are out there that have, recovered. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, you did beat me to the next question, but that's great. So it's basically you have like an in-house therapist that you can use whenever.
Yeah, we've got a couple of them. And then we've got other tools. Another tool that I've heard thrown around lately, I was talking to a CFO of a large general contractor just Friday, um, because I'd like to find a partner out here in the DFW market that we can really take this show on the road. I would like to educate other companies on the benefits and merits of having someone in-house that folks can talk to. And there are a lot of other tools. There's a entity called the Chaplain, which is basically doing the same thing, but it's more formalized. They're just marketing it in a different way. One of the things that people have had access to for a decade now is just the ability to call the 1-800 number
Right.
and through your health benefits, and that's fine, that's great. But I mean, these tools are actually forming a relationship with somebody, and people want to talk to people that they can trust, that they know that they know they're not going to turn around and tell other people. There's a confidentiality about this that I think is solid. And people who get to know you, and it's the same person over and over again. But going back to the champion, I'm really looking for ways. There's a lot of folks in the world that have recovered from something, right?
Yeah.
And they've worked hard. They've worked hard to do that, and they've had support. And they're not alone when they do this. Now they can gain skill sets that they can use when they're alone to get through a bout of anxiety
Right.
or fear or something like that. But quite honestly, I think it takes a village. And what I've seen work through anything that's been traumatic, anything that has been addicted, that has an addiction, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's shopping, whether it's sex. Well, there's so many things that we can get addicted to. Gambling, man, I watched a guy just completely blow hundreds of millions of dollars gambling. I mean, it's just bizarre what we can get addicted to. So I would like to see that pool of people that I am familiar with that have gone through hell. Let's just call it what it is.
Right.
And they have found a reason to thrive. And they now have a community and a fellowship of people that are like-minded, that have gone through a similar experience. And they are now jettisoning 180-degree about face back into the world. And I don't know of a group that's more grateful for being where they are. If they get employed, they are more happy than anybody else to be there, because quite frankly, in their opinion, they're just living on extra days here. So the I honest, hardworking people that are full of gratitude for having been through it and trudged and come out smelling like a rose. So I would like to see construction firms across the country not only recognize that they can do more for the people that are already there, right? But tap into a group of folks that could fill this labor shortage that we continue to talk about in the industry, and this might just be a blip, right? I mean, if one $500 million contractor hires 3 people, and then provides the tools to help that make a sticky situation, like, we're going to support you, right?
Right.
You may be out of the ether about 8 months, 10 months, you're doing well, but we recognize that, that you don't have as much experience as someone who's been recovered for 20 years, right? That person with 8 months might need a little bit more support. Nothing that's going to be over the top, and certainly don't have to single these people out, in front of their peers. But just recognize that once we can get these people in and we can get them fulfilling, gaps, skilled labor, and we can support them, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we end up seeing that those people become the happiest. They become a recruiting source for other people that are like them. They end up doing nothing but provide a more secure culture. And I just would love to see. I guess here's where I'm going with this, Sal. I would love for wherever this podcast is going to be broadcast out there to other folks, other general contractors that would be willing to sit down and have a conversation about the steps that we could take to not only develop the people that are already struggling within the walls, but maybe find an avenue to get out there and partner with nonprofits, with 12-step programs, with other organizations that are trying to find catalysts for change in their industry. And I'd like to see the construction industry do that.
That sounds awesome. How do we get that ball rolling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have the magic wand to tell you how it's going to
Right.
happen, but I do know this, that um, a conversation between Brad and Sal
Yeah.
that now can be broadcast to many. I think that just keeps this conversation going. At the DFW chapter, well, here, let me even back up before I go to the panel discussion we had. So I work with a group here in town that's called the Dallas 24-Hour Club. And the Dallas 24-Hour Club is tailored to supporting folks that are living on the streets that have had some type of experience with addiction or alcoholism, right? And the goal is to bring them in and give them a place to sleep and some food to eat and get them on the path to recovery immediately. And there's accountability associated with that. Like there are internal meetings that take place at the Dallas 24-Hour Club. It's called the Ross Street Groups. And those they have to attend, and they can work through these various phases where, I mean, you start off sleeping on the floor, right?
Right.
But in a
Yeah.
couple weeks, if you've got a job and now you're doing something, you're flipping burgers down across, the street at the Hardee's, and you're showing some gumption that you really want to recover and you want to get off the streets,
Right.
then you move into a room with 8 guys and you're now in bunk beds. And then there's a next phase that there's an apartment complex, and it may take you 6 months to get to the apartment complex, but everybody in there is in recovery and now they're working and they're self-sufficient and they're off the streets. There's got to be places like that all over the country, and if there aren't, there should be.
Right.
So if you have more money and you know what to do with, and you're listening and you have a heart for folks that are struggling, go do something like that in your community, because it's changing lives here in Dallas. And we're seeing 600 to 800 people a year come through there. And the guy who's now the executive director of the Dallas 24-Hour Club started out sleeping on the floor.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, it's so I would like to see that. There's got to be some community. First of all, there just has to be an empathetic heart, and then maybe a leadership style that is a little bit more servant based, right? Like, yes, profits are great, and yes, we all need to make money, and yes, we have to pay everybody. But in the same time, since we're spending more time together at work with these folks than we are our own families back at home,
Right.
let's support them in a way we'd like to support our own children, right? This is our family. These are the people that go out there and build the buildings. They make it happen. So if you know that somebody's struggling, give them the tools, and we'll help you. There's coming out of this pandemic, Sal, we see this all over the internet right now. I mean, people are throwing out suicide prevention left and right. Well, quite frankly, it just starts with mental health,
Mhm.
because mental health then transitions into addiction, which transitions into alcoholism. And we all know that wherever you travel with mental health might lead to suicide, right? So I don't want to talk about suicide. I want to talk about the stuff beforehand, right? So I want companies feeding the employees that are struggling initially, but I also want them to go out and support the organizations that are going to be an element of change before they even get in the door,
Right.
and
Yeah.
maybe even, go provide a segment into your own uh, cities and your own towns that are a thriving group of people that are getting through whatever their struggles are, and you know what, and bringing them in house, you know. And so I go back to a conversation that the executive director that is just retired from the Dallas 24-hour club was having with a developer here in Dallas. And there was you might remember that Dallas imploded a building, and the only thing that didn't fall was an elevator shaft, and it kind of was the Leaning Tower of Dallas. I don't know if you saw that 2 or 3 years ago, but
No.
it
Okay.
was just this structure that was kind of like looked like the Leaning Tower, but it was an elevator shaft in Dallas. I
Okay.
mean, it was kind of cool. So anyhow, when this developer swept that lot to clear and bulldoze, they displaced the homeless,
Right.
and she felt terrible about it. She
Yeah.
felt terrible about it. Where are these people going? So she's talking to the executive director, this developer and the executive director are talking about, hey, we need to do something. Lo and behold, this developer is doing a home remodel, and this HVAC company comes in. This guy is just dynamic, and he's fun, and he's engaged, and he's helpful. And this woman in Dallas who does development for a living is talking to this guy who is an HVAC employee, and they hit it off. And what she ends up finding out is this guy had been a product of the Dallas 24-hour club, okay, had gone through the process, had gotten back into a consistent lifestyle where he was self-sufficient and sober. He
Right.
found an HVAC company that only hired sober people, and everybody in that company is in recovery. And these two
Wow.
hit it off. So my developer friend, Anne Marie, comes back to Marcia, the executive director, and says, what do we do? Well, the director of the Dallas 24-hour club calls me up and says, Brad, you're in construction, right? And I said, I absolutely am. And she goes, I got an idea. And I said, hit me with it, Marcia. So we started talking about this. And then we grabbed another general contractor here in Dallas that had a safety manager that had a heart for helping his own guys, right? That were struggling. And so we formed a panel discussion at the DFW chapter earlier this year that consisted of the executive director of the Dallas 24-hour club, yeah, Anne Marie, who helps run the development company, the executive director of the North Texas Suicide Prevention Center here in Dallas, and then the safety director for a general contractor. And Sal, I'm not kidding. The conversation that started in that room and the energy that was created, we had people coming up after and saying, we need to do more. You guys need to keep talking about this. I had this CFO, this large company that we all know about, came up to me and said, I don't know what you're doing. This is different than the suicide prevention talk we've been hearing 3 or 4 years. Keep going down this road, Brad. This is good. So that's what I'm doing. How it happens, I don't know.
Yeah.
This, how we get from A to Z, Sal, I don't know. But we're just going to keep talking, and we're just going to keep having the conversation. And, maybe we'll turn around someday and there will be a small blip of change that has occurred in this industry. And, some people will look back and say, hey, I heard that podcast that Sal did, with Brad 4 years ago. That was meaningful.
Well, that's the goal, right? Any little thing we can do to break the stigma or get people talking or
Right.
just keeping the subject forefront. Let's transition a little bit into advice, since this has really all been advice, but advice you might have for somebody who is new to the industry. Do you have any?
Yeah, that's a great question. I represent a small segment, although a very important segment of the industry in insurance and risk management and surety and benefits. I mean, there are just so many ways for individuals these days to get involved in construction. What I see happening in the marketplace is that we have fewer, and I know this because I have a 26-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 10-year-old, that I see kids uh, not as focused on college anymore. Like, and I'm okay with that, just
Yeah.
as long as that kid is steered in the direction of finding purpose somewhere, right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of great work that the construction industry is doing right now in even middle schools, but yet high schools, right? And giving these kids a vision for what's possible. I think just collectively, um, uh, the work that we're putting into the youth to give them a vision, I think is going to help us in the future better acclimate people into recruit and then acclimate them and make it more sticky in the future. They're already going to have an understanding of construction with some of these services that are out there speaking into 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids that, man, as soon as that bell rings at 3 o'clock on Thursday and they're out, senior year, what's next? They got to
Yeah.
go work, right?
Yep.
Um, and so I think that there's lots of opportunities. Um, Now, for those folks, to answer your question, that have come on board, I think that I think the best advice that you can give anybody in anywhere at any time is to just go in and be honest and be open-minded and be willing,
Right.
and then just kind of let the energy of the world take care of it from there, right? Just go in and treat people the way you want to be treated, and the answers will come,
Right.
as they say.
Yeah.
Is that the Dalai Lama? I don't know who that is. The answers will come. Maybe it's
It might
Yoda.
be.
Maybe it's
It's,
Yoda. I don't
it
know.
would have to be backwards if it were Yoda, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
that's right. That's right. Um, so I just think that you go in and because I have these kids, and because I experienced this myself, I was 24 once, and I wanted to know it all.
Yep.
And I wanted you to know that I knew it all, and that didn't work, right? Because I didn't know anything. The older I get, the less I know. And so to just go in and be humble and know that grab a hold of a mentor, find somebody that you like, that you get
Yeah.
along with, and just partner with them and just keep talking to them, and use that person as a sounding board, and get involved with what they're involved in, and if you don't like what they're involved in, pivot to whatever it is that's really drawing you in, and just go in and do it, and know that there's fear associated with all of that, and we don't always know what we're getting into, and that we don't have to be perfectionist and do it right. I just think that we the greatest gifts people can get at that age are the mistakes we make. And when you make those mistakes, you now have experience that others don't have, because they had so much fear that they didn't even take the risk. But
Right.
if you go in there and you know that you're going to take the risk and you're going to stumble and you're going to fall, get back up and go more, and have that person help guide you, and be honest and be open-minded and be willing. And man, I don't know of another industry that, I don't care what's going on in the world, there's always going to be a need for folks in this industry.
Yep.
And, whether it's you, Sal, helping support the industry, whether it's me helping support risk management strategy for the industry, whether it's the accountants, whether it's the architects, there are a bazillion ways that you can get into construction and not necessarily have to swing a sledgehammer. And that's important too.
And we need to keep that message going that there's just so many different aspects of it.
I watched a robot hang glass, do curtain wall on the Space Needle in Seattle. I've watched robots take down buildings. I've watched robots hang drywall. So you tell me that kid, that 14-year-old, you know, playing Mortal Kombat or whatever he's doing with that joystick and,
Yep.
100 miles an hour with his thumbs, maybe he could, sit in the cab of some robot one day and,
Yep.
build a building himself. I don't know, you know, who knows where we're going with this, but I think there's something for everyone these days, for sure.
I agree. So, on the theme of suicide prevention and mental well-being and self-care, my self-care looks like movies and TV shows and books. What's your self-care routine look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And man, I hope everybody finds something that provides them a little peace. I've had some good mentors along the way that I met when I was real young, and one in particular taught me the gift of meditation and breathing. And I've spent my entire adult life learning how to pay less attention to the squirrel cage between my ears.
Yeah.
Because what I found early on is that 95% of the crap that goes on between my ears is all BS. And so I need to find that 5% that's really worth listening to. And I think that takes practice. I
Yeah.
think that there's an almost even an art to it. But I gotta, Terry just said, man, focus on the breath on the tip of your nose and close your eyes. And when you find yourself out in a fear thought, pop pop the bubble, and get back to your focus. And the focus is on the breath on the tip of your nose. And
Very
let's stay
nice.
there. And that today I can do that and I can stay there for 10, 20, 30 minutes, right? But man, when I first started that, I couldn't do it for 15 seconds.
Right.
And I'll give you one of my best friends on the planet, Brian. I think he stole this from somebody, but visualize a fish tank. Um, and there's always the treasure chest in the fish tank, right? And the treasure chest is popped open, the jewels are falling out, and the bubbles are coming up, right? And you think about a fish, immersed in the water, and it's just kind of swaying through the current, and it's just surrounded by its environment and what it knows, and it's just comforting, and they feel like they're just a part of something, and the fish just looks comfortable, and then all of a sudden that fish gets caught in one of those bubbles coming out of the treasure chest, and the water's no longer around them, and they no longer feel comfortable, and they're lost in this like space of like, I don't know what the heck's going on, but I don't like it and I don't want to be here anymore. And then all of a sudden, pop, they're right back into the water and life is good again and it feels all right. Well, that analogy is our brain. So when we get caught in one of those bubbles and we get into this fear-based thinking of like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not going to do it, or this isn't great enough, or I'm going to lose that, or I'm never going to get that, blah, 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 blah. And it all happens, as quickly as you can reel in a rod, right? I
Yep.
mean, those thoughts are going 100 miles an hour. When you can pop those fear bubbles and not get caught going down that path and just get back to where you are, which is where your feet are.
Mhm.
Well, Ram Dass wrote the book, Be Here Now. Why not be here now? Because all that other stuff, you're either fearing something that's never going to happen or it's in the past and there ain't a damn thing you can do about it. So,
Yep.
man, that's my practice. And that has exploded and grown into so many different things that I do. And there's been other things that I've gotten a hold of: running, exercise, eating well. The honesty, the open-mindedness, the willingness, all of that stuff is just, those are tools that help me stay present and in the moment and not dysfunctional and not agitating, the energy of the planet, whatever that is. And I don't even
Right.
know what to call it, but I just try to stay in the middle. Um, and man, sometimes breathing uh, is the best tool for me. So
That's great.
yeah.
Wow. All right. Well, Brad, we could stay here all day, I feel like, and it would be a great conversation. But is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Other than just like I assume there's going to be people from all over CFMA listening to this, the fives, the tens of them. I don't know how many people are listening to this, Sal, but
We're gonna try to
um,
get to 25 to that for this
25 would
episode.
be
Yeah. Yeah.
25 would
Would be
be
great.
awesome. And maybe one of those 25 has heard something today that has been a spark, and maybe that spark will become a catalyst, and maybe that catalyst will actually end up developing into some change. And I'd like to see some action taken by some of the specialty contractors and the great GCs that are represented in our general membership. And I'm just an associate member that's willing to put in some heart and some energy into something that's near and dear to my heart. And so if there's others out there that kind of feel the same, they know where to find me in the directory, and I'm open to conversations about this at any day of the night. So that's it.
Awesome. That's great. Well, Brad, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Sal. Appreciate you.